Thank you. Thank you for taking your seats. Please put your hands together and welcome Christopher Morrison.
Hey. Thank you. Nothing like going from a human that needs no introduction to a human that needs nothing but introduction. And first of all, an apology. I'm going to irritate everyone in the room if the blinking X hasn't done it already. Apologies to the BSL interpreters and the camera crew. All right, you'll find out why in a minute. This is usually my much more aggressive title for this talk, which I usually give to everything from film producers to AAA people to indie people to whatever. So the good news is you don't need this. I think I'm preaching to the choir here a little bit. A little context for who I am. This is completely lifted directly from Hannah Nicklin, which also needs to know. Another human probably doesn't need any introduction to this room. I come from the same thing that she does, except from a gender-flipped position. I am a cishet white guy. I'm trying to get better. So that's what that says, basically. It's an everyday thing. I'm working on it. Very serious about it. But, you know, whatever. All right, so here's me, okay? It is in a nutshell. I believe, like Tabitha Jackson does, that narrative informs culture and policy, which simply means that, for me, all stories either reinforce the status quo or challenge the status quo. Being an old metalhead and punk person, guess where I land? The bellwether there is actually my feature film that I wrote and directed in 2017 in Belgium. That is a pro-abortion attempt to analyze institutionalized misogyny. We get it? Okay, we know where I am. All right, groovy. So, like I said, preaching to the choir here, what is really about to happen is this simple premise. Probably not as much in this room as most other rooms that I talk to, so apologies for that aggression as well. Let's get on with it. This is what we are mostly doing in Story in the West, okay? And what the problem is when we involve technology and what I consider to be older storytelling forms. We're using old models that do not fit the technology that we are telling stories with. We're using harmful models on that point that are designed to reinforce the status quo, if you assume that reinforcing the status quo is harmful. I do. We do not have to follow the 3-act structure or the hero's journey because they fit the criteria of both of the above. And we do not have to have conflict as a story driver. We've got a bunch of narrative people in the room. Raise your hand if you've taken a creative writing class in the West. Yeah, awesome. What did they tell you was the heart of drama? What? Conflict. Okay, I don't have time to go into how much bullshit that is, but it's because this is about structure stuff. Just know that's what I believe, all right? Happy, moving on. So that's really quick for those that didn't get a chance to get indoctrinated as much as most of us. Very quickly, again, I know you guys know this, but let's let you folks know this, but let's move on. Traditional 3-act structure, hey, look, this is so simple. I'm from America, obviously, as you can tell from the ridiculous accent. We teach this to second graders. It's so fucking simple, the 3-act structure, right? It looks what we call in America, the story mountain. Okay, all right, Act 1, Act 2, notice most importantly the little rising pit of Act 2, climax, and then you fucking go to sleep. Okay, I'm in a room full of adults. We can also acknowledge that this is a male orgasm chart, yes? Good, okay, this shit is in the open, people, okay? So, all right, but most importantly, please remember this little factoid down here. That's what it is. Speaking of this, the next thing we get told most of the times, if you take everybody semi-familiar with the hero's journey? Yeah? Okay, groovy. Does anyone know what the hero's journey actually, its actual name is? Say it again? Sorry, one at a time. Scream at me. Character arc. No. Monomyth. Here we go. We got a professor in the house. Who here has studied their Greek? What does mono mean? One. Okay, we all fucking know what myth means, which is something that every single culture on the earth has devised. They have myths, they have music, and we have devised a way to hurt each other through martial arts, but that's beside the point. Okay? When you have the cojones to stick the word one in front of the word myth, once again, we have a fucking problem, okay? We should have seen it from the beginning, yes? It's a reductionist way to look at myth. It was a cherry-picked piece of sociological science. I am not a science denier. Let me be clear. I like sociology as well. But some things get extrapolated far too far, and this is certainly one of them. This is a creator who taught at a women's college for 30 years, and when a woman who directly conflicted him, what the fuck, Morrison, all right, language, said basically, hey, where's the women in this? He said, oh, don't worry about the women. That's where we're all trying to get to, which seems kind of cool, but wait a minute. That means the women can't go on the hero's journey? Maureen Murdoch said, fuck off, who was the woman that asked that question, and then wrote the heroine's journey. Please check it out, okay? So once again, human teaching at a women's college for 40 years believes half of the human race doesn't belong in his system. Problem, okay? Like I said, hiding in plain sight. The other problem is this. So many books written by so many mostly white dudes saying all the same shit except with a little bit more of detail. That's it. It's there. You know it. You've read them. Let's move on. So let's take a look at what kind of stories this actually gives us and what we get here in the West from a 3-act structure. If you want to throw on the hero's journey, go ahead. They are two very separate things, but bleh. All right, is psychological-based storytelling. Okay, what is psychological-based storytelling? In the West, we are obsessed with immersion, not in the sense, and we all know that immersion is a terrible word in this context, but let's go with it, right? Immersion here simply means that when Thor fails to cut off Thanos' head, spoilers, fails to cut off Thanos' head, he gets depressed and he drinks too much beer and he gets a dad bod that he then has to find his self-confidence and work out with giant chains and then become sexy again. And there goes my pin. What a shame. Everybody understand? So that means Thor, a literal god, now has human psychology that we can chill and relate to. Yeah? Makes some sense? That's what we mean by Western immersion. Okay? It just basically means that our main characters, we have to understand them through their motivations. Okay? I want to put that in fucking air quotes as well. And through their psychology. I believe in psychology, in therapy, shock, surprises no one. Look at how I dress. Okay? But that means we have to understand their motivations through their actions, and that's where story lives, right? Someone said character arc before. That's what drives that character arc, supposedly. There's also an obsession with realism. That gets in air quotes, and that doesn't get a caveat. An obsession with change, an obsession with psychology, and catharsis. Don't have time to define those things, but you know. The point here is that psychology is not the only way we understand the world in any way, shape, or form. Yet psychology, especially if anybody in here is lucky, quote unquote, enough to deal with any kind of project with money that has a producer, a creative producer, who steps in and tries to understand all these things. What you can then tell them is that we can also understand the world through, hey, something like that, or this, or any of this shit. All of these things can drive your story outside of psychology and or conflict, okay? Take pictures. All right, here we go. Let's do it. All right, case study in fuckitude. You want me to prove my point? Let me prove my point. Yeah, I know, ladies and gentlemen. I know you have a theory. I know you have a theory about what went wrong with Game of Thrones. Spoilers coming up again. All right? But let's really analyze this from an interesting point of view, which is not mine. So this is all thanks to Zeynep Tufekci. Excuse my Turkish, it's terrible. That is not how you pronounce her last name. I apologize. So this is lifted directly from her. So, yeah, again, all your theories are right about what went wrong with Game of Thrones. Okay, moving on. All right, so here's the real problem. What happened to Game of Thrones was a problem of psychological-based storytelling. Before the last season, they were influenced by a group of novels. Those novels did not have a singular main character. It was interested in examining a society. Those characters lived in a society. We lived with them inside the society, and we understood their actions in reflection of that society. The first book in the series is actually not called Game of Thrones, but the TV series is called Game of Thrones, not like what the fuck is happening in Ned Stark's head. Right? So much so that at the end of season 1, spoilers again, Ned Stark's head is on the floor. We change main characters, right? So we're not in a psychological-driven story. Once the TV show laps the books and we end up in a final season, our television writers fall back on psychological-based storytelling and shove the attention all inside Jon Snow and Dany Targaryen's head. And that's the problem. We changed storytelling techniques without a nice transition. They just fell back on what they knew, from my point of view, of course. You know, argue with me and burn my house down later, okay? There you go. So what are psychological-based stories? It's kind of everything that isn't psychology. So yeah, okay, all right, I know that's a cheat. All right, so let's sort of look. Sorry. So it's these things, all right? Again, it's an examination of character through the lens of the society in which they live, all right? And keeping that the focus of your story. All right, moving on. Psychological storytelling also leads to the idiot plot, which is one of my favorite phrases ever composed in English. Again, this is lifted from somebody else. You'll notice I'm not smart. I just talk about other smart people. This is David Brin, and this is a concept from Roger Ebert as well. Also, psychological-based storytelling leads to plot armor, manufactured conflict, and false jeopardy. I'm not going to talk about those. We're going to talk about the idiot plot for a second. Remember this, okay? More importantly, remember that. The three-act structure in Act 2 relies on a very simple thing. It is called rising tension, okay? What rising tension leads to is this very simple fact. See, I picked a game. I get no response for Dirk? All right, fine. What it means is your main character is the only one who can solve the problem. That's it. So what that means is you must isolate your hero to the point that everyone else in society is an idiot. Or fucking dead. Everybody, what happens to the mentor character? Dead. What happens to their, it's usually white male's wife? Dead, yeah, if you don't know that, wake up. Okay, all right, so, all right, there's a literal term called fridging, right? Anyone who shows up to help the main character is going to end up dead, or, what's the other option? They're secretly evil, working for the other side. What this leads to is complete isolation of a main character that hopefully, basically according to Western particular fiction, leads to a fist fight to the main character punching the evil in the face and winning, all on their own. Regardless of what they've learned before, no one in society can show up. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, I am not a fan of the police. 100% behind hashtag abolish the police for fucking America. But it's a 200-year system that functions because they have money and a manpower, brainwashed manpower. So when you call them, they show up and they do stuff like beat the shit out of the problem or put it in the back of a van or take it away, all right? So what the idiot plot says is that not only all the people that are involved with the main character have to be idiots or dead, all the systems in society that function are either full of idiots or for some reason don't magically all of a sudden stop working. Again, this is not endorsement of institutions. You can probably guess I'm not a huge fan of those. But does that make sense? Right? Everything around our hero, in order to isolate them to be the only one, the chosen one, to solve the problem, is they have to live in a society full of idiots. If you've got a poster like this with a white guy pointing a gun at you, idiot plot resides within, I promise. Okay, so moving on, sorry, yes, and every Skywalker you know is a mass murderer, by the way, but anyway, let's move on. I don't have time to deal with that slide. Where am I at? Okay, 12 minutes, not bad. Okay, so let's talk some solutions. Morrison has literally screamed at us for 12 minutes. What else can we do, all right? We can look to other cultures and other smart people, all right? So let's go to Japan for a second. Japanese games made a very fantastic appearance yesterday. From what I hear, sorry I missed that. This is I gotta read it. Kisho Tenketsu structure, which simply states that there is an introduction, a development, a twist, and a conclusion. That's it. That's the structure. Nothing about rising tension, nothing about isolation. That's it. That's your structure. Anybody in here, since I know there's somebody in here also works in platform games? Really? Nobody? Wow, this is a selective group. All right, fine. Then research this for platformers, and you'll see this also in action in terms of mechanics if you're interested. Now, though, the eagle-eyed in the room probably noticed this, but Morrison, that looks an awful lot like that fucking picture that you just showed. Well, here's the deal. This is just the stupid picture that I pulled off of Google that comes up immediately, which I guaranteed was made by a white guy. All right, so here's the news. Your development does not have to rise. Your development can do any of these things. You can develop backwards. Your development could be spiral. It could go diagonally. It could be fractal. It could be joy. You can develop joy. You can develop heartbreak. It can go sideways. It does not have to escalate. Okay? It's just a shitty picture drawn by a human that didn't get it, that was obsessed with that. Okay? So, moving on. Doesn't have to escalate. So there you go. There's one option. Again, I don't have enough time to go into, but please, again, you do not have to have conflict to drive your story, but let's look at other structures from two other absolute lights in the darkness for us for decades. And of course, as usually, we usually don't listen to them. So this is Ursula K. Le Guin, who is passed, who is a mad, crazy genius about narrative. Please read everything she's ever written about writing. She's got a couple of those things, and anything she's ever written will make you happy, I promise. Send me checks. All right, so Jane Allison. Speaking of someone who owes me checks, all I do is stomp around the world selling this woman's book. This is the book that crystallized a bunch of things that I was thinking. This is Meander, Spiral, Explode. We're about to take a deep dive into her. Here is her original thought, which is, hey, we've been following Aristotle for so long, who with this three-act structure thing, which was designed for a specific thing, which was what? The three-act structure comes from as an analyzation of what? Up there? What's up? One more time. Plays. Anybody? Can we get more specific? What kind of plays? Correct. 100,000%. Big old ass gold star. Boop. Right? An astral projected gold star to you, my friend. Greek tragedy, which is a theatrical form. I love it. I come from theater. 3,000 years ago, okay? That also had a societal ramification. The entire society stopped and went to the theater to observe this thing. Can we say that that's a specific time and place and a specific function? So now, that doesn't mean it's garbage, but it belongs to a certain thing. So the real question is, once we develop other technology like, oh, say, the printing press, did we apply that structure to, say, the fucking novel, which is just a bunch of blank pages? This is from her point of view, minus the swearing. The swearing is all mine. I have to add something, right? Okay? So she questions that, and then decides to go to nature to look for different structures instead of the orgasmic, well, the male orgasmic structure that we've all been given. So let's talk about one of her first structures, which is a wave example. Okay, this is also where I start to talk about examples being autopsy work. This is not the point of this talk. The point of this talk is not autopsy to prove that these things exist. The point of this is to give you structures so that you can create. Does everybody understand the difference? Not analyze the dead thing that's already been created and torn apart, okay? But I gotta give examples because otherwise people really, really don't like me. Or they don't give me time to do a workshop. So here's the deal. Let's talk about a wave, okay? You're like, hey, wait a minute, Christopher, that kind of looks like the mountain thing, except it isn't. A wave gathers all of its energy, and it peaks in the middle, and then it collapses, okay? No matter how strong the wave looks at the end, that is the dissipation of energy. Does everybody understand what I'm saying here? So what you get is this. I got to put this down for a second. Apologies. Is this structure, okay? Which means your climax is dead in the middle. You got just as much story in the front as you got in the back, okay? And this isn't going to sleep. This is a wave crashing on your fucking head. Anybody ever been tossed by a wave? Yeah, you're not asleep in it. All right, well, you might be asleep forever, but there you go. So here's the news. An example, so those that are craving examples, except for the ones that have already read the board, all right? Good for you. Let's talk about Psycho. Someone tell me what the climax of Psycho is. Or actually just sing it to me. Right? Yeah, that's the climax of Psycho. But Christopher, those of you that are film nerds in the house, where does that scene happen? I've already told you. In the fucking middle. Does anybody know the actual climax of Psycho? You don't. Don't even pretend like you do. All right? So what does that mean? Does anybody know what the original genre of Psycho is? How does Psycho start? What genre is it? If you say horror movie, you're 100% wrong. Film noir. Ish. Not really. Be more, I should say yes, but be more specific. Crime story. Beautiful. Really, I consider it a heist film. Is that fair? We cool with that? It's a heist movie. We're watching Marion Crane steal $50,000. Let's go, Marion Crane. And then she gets in the shower in the middle of the film. And then we're into a horror film. So the energy at the end of the movie, we switch main characters, we switch genre, we switch point of view, and we switch the audience question. Who's this fucking Perkins guy, by the way? And because he also has enough fucking charisma and is a badass actor, that happens. Everybody understand what I'm saying? Also, these other movies, okay, and other things that are on the list. All right, let's move on. Next thing is homegrown talent that I have to mention when I talk about a wavelet structure, which again is an undulation, or some people like ripples. If you're a theater fan, if you know Carol Churchill's work as a playwright, there is no such thing as a climax in a Carol Churchill play. There's a bunch of mini climaxes that add up to information. Female orgasm chart, by the way. Okay? So, it's a way to eschew things. So she's a wonderful example of that. My favorite example of this is the television show Atlanta. If you haven't seen it, sorry, sort of semi-spoilers. Season 3, there are 4 main characters in Atlanta. Season 3 of Atlanta has 10 episodes. In 4 of those episodes, none of the main characters appear. Let me stress that again. None of the main characters appear in 4 out of 40% of season 3. How do they get away with that? It's because it's not a psychological-based journey. It's a journey that a central question is, what does it mean to be black in America? So they don't care about what's going on inside Childish Gambino's mind all the time. These are things you can get away with when you start to walk away from quote-unquote traditional structures. All right, so that's a little bit of a wavelet there for you. Okay, let's talk about spirals, or goats, or whatever you want to do. All right, so spirals, for the native English speakers in here, already have a story connotation. He spiraled into depression. He spiraled up to heaven. He spiraled out of conflict, right? Yes, there's already that meat is already in our systems, okay? Spirals are great for breaking cause and effect. It's another thing you don't necessarily need in your stories. I know. Like I said, accost me in the parking lot. It's all good. Let's talk. We're not going to be able to talk here because I'm going to run out of time. I promise. But I want to have all the fights, all of the joys, and all of the fist bumps I can take before the end of the day. I promise. So, spirals allow you to break cause and effect. Here's a perfect example. Anybody a fan of Wong Kar-wai, Chinese filmmaker? Yeah, he's also someone you need to make a game out of. Okay, unless any of his movies, please. All right. So Wong Kar-wai's film In the Mood for Love is a romance where the 2 people who are in love with each other aren't allowed to consummate the romance or say the word love. Okay, so wait, what's that movie, right? Is it just a movie of frustration? Yes, and what it is, it's a movie of place. The 2 people who love each other are currently married to each other, and they live in the same building across the hall from each other. So the only places we have in that film is this fucked up, kick-ass camera shot inside the male part of the partner's bedroom into the hallway, and a staircase to a noodle shop. And we just keep coming back to those locations and looping around and around and around and around while this non-romance plays itself out. If you like Everything Everywhere All at Once, Wong Kar-wai was referenced in the when Ki Hugh Kwan and Michelle Yeoh were being badass, successful people. That is a direct reference to this film. So again, there are other locations when you watch the movie and be like, Morrison lied to me. All right, I did. There are other locations in the movie, but the linchpins of those films is that it's a spiral around their location, where they meet. And where they meet means what they can say when they can say it. You can spiral around a whole bunch of other shit. Amadeus is one. Everything All at Once, I think, is a brilliant spiral. Blah, 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 blah. If you are a poet or a song person, structure A, B, C. A1, B1, C1. If this doesn't make any sense, no problems. But for the people that's in here, I'm sure it's blowing your minds. Okay. So that's another way to look at story. Or structure story. All right, last one. Let's look at an explosion or radial. Okay? An explosion or radial basically simply says that the burning heart of this story is just that. It's so white hot, it has to be the first scene or somewhere close to the first scene, and then everything else is connected to that moment. Must reference that moment because it is inescapable. Perfect example for this is Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon, which was a myth and a play before, but anyway, complicated 5 minutes. So, Rashomon basically is a horrifying story of, apologies for missing the trigger warning at the top, a sexual assault that is then re-examined from 3 different points of views. Ridley Scott ripped this off for whatever Last Duel. All right, so anyway, with no reference. Anyway, so, but that thing is always referenced. You can never escape that moment. Another one is a Canadian filmmaker, Adam Egoyan's film, The Sweet Hereafter, which is a small town in Canada that has a bus accident that kills 80% of that town's children. We get 5 main characters from their point of view of the repercussions of that accident. You will never escape that accident in that film. Also notice how these structures honor trauma. They honor what happens to these people. We're not interested in the psychology of one character's perception. It is how do these things affect actual communities sometimes. All right? Moving on. These are some resources. This is the slide you need to take a picture of because these are all much smarter people than I am, okay? And I'm already running out of time, so please, I'll leave this up for another 5 seconds, and I can breathe. Cool. All right, moving on. So, I used to think, the thing I didn't mention is I've been lucky enough to have a weird indie career skidding across everything from theater to film to TV to VR to XR to video games nowadays. And I've found all humans that are thinking this in a bunch of different buckets. I'm very now comfortable to say that this is a movement that you can plug into, that we're all trying to start. So who else that's smart that you might recognize believes this? Okay, for the literati in the crowd, that's Salman Rushdie, who literally said this, okay? So, and I drew the bubble. I'm so proud of myself, okay? You do not need the traditional forms. This, again, is not to say that they are useless. We can just move past them. Why? Because of Ursula K. Le Guin's quote, which is up there, which is basically, I'm going to paraphrase, the traditional hero story is something that I believe, just like she does, is that something that is murdering us, is creating. We are now in a phase where media is so prevalent and so many stories, and we've been here for almost 100 years, where art is no longer imitating life. Life is desperately trying to imitate art all the way down to the therapy level. You know the movement of be the hero in your own story in the self-help world. This can be dangerous if we do not envision a new future, if we do not tell stories that see a new future, we cannot live there. Thanks for coming to my TED rant. That's me. Sure, yeah, whatever. Yeah, please.
We've got time for one question, so make it a good one. I see your hand. Okay. There's a lot of pressure on you now, I'm afraid. I've really built this up.
But seriously, I will be hanging around all day. Corner me, whatever, punch me in the face, do whatever you got to do. Very punchable face.
Hello. Thank you so much for your talk. It was really great and really exciting. So my question is, I find it a lot easier to write a story that's the kind of mainstream type of psychological, plot-driven, and follows the main character's character development. I also think that kind of story is easier for an audience to get it. So do you have any advice on writing other kinds of stories and getting the audience on board with other kinds of stories?
Brilliant question. Yes, and that is go all in. You cannot apologize for your new structure. And also have faith that your audience will go with you. That being said, if you got to, build a fucking tutorial on how to understand their story. This comes from theater. Got some theater heads in the room? Got some theater people, makers, or possibly even if you go. This seems weird. In every theater piece, we teach you how to watch it, right? The accepted thing is that you come in, you sit in a fucking crowd, and there's a proscenium, and the lights go down, and things happen. But even when that happens, when the fucking chandelier comes down, and when the stagehand comes out, or whatever, we're teaching you how to watch the show. Audiences love that shit, okay? They eat it up. They come to you asking as a narrative person, tell me how to experience your world. So, and this really sucks when you're talking to a producer who does not believe you. My answer is please show them a couple of slides from this or develop a few of your own to give them examples and blow their mind when you say Psycho isn't a fucking 3-act structure. Okay, and just be like, it's a wave, Morrison did this, right, whatever. Give your money people a reason to understand where you're coming from. Give your audience a ramp in to understand how that goes. This is also something from VR. You put that fucking headset on, we've got to teach you how to be here. We got to spend at least 15 seconds to a minute and a half to teach you where you are. You could do the same thing with your video games, I promise, without a standard sort of tutorial if you need it. But know that that's got to be part of the narrative, the ramp in. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. That was great.
Pleasure. Cool. According to my clock, I got 30 seconds left. You can give her.
What would you like to, is there anything you want to do in that 30 seconds?
Yeah, I want someone to yell at me for 30 seconds.
Have you got a good question?
Oh, God. What? No, does anyone have? I cannot think.
It's all right.
That was an unconventionally structured question,
It was
which I think is very
100%
appropriate.
agree. Hard agree.
Thank you very much, Christopher Morrison.
Thank you, folks.